Some souls arrive gently, wrapped in warmth and welcomed with open arms. But others? Others are born straight into the fire, into houses where silence cuts deeper than any words ever could, into families where love has to be earned, performed, or begged for, into bloodlines built on control, chaos, or that suffocating quiet despair that hangs in the air like smoke. And if that's you, if you've ever sat at your own dinner table feeling like a stranger in your own home, if you've ever looked around and thought, why me? Why this family? Why this life? Listen closely. You are not broken. You are not cursed. You are chosen. Carl Jung didn't believe the soul gets placed randomly. He believed that your deepest self, that core intelligence of your being, doesn't choose the safest path. It chooses the most transformative one. And those who carry a different frequency, the black sheep, the cycle breakers, the empaths, the ones who just feel everything. They're often born into families that simply cannot meet them where they are. Not because they're not worthy of love, but because they're here to transform the absence of it. This isn't punishment, it's initiation, a sacred calling wrapped in pain that most people would never understand. Jung taught us something profound. The soul doesn't grow through comfort, it grows through friction. And nowhere is that friction more intense than in the family you were born into. According to Jung, we're all born into what he called a family complex. Basically, an inherited emotional blueprint shaped by our parents' beliefs, their traumas, their unresolved wounds. These patterns operate completely beneath our awareness. Like invisible scripts we're handed the moment we take our first breath. You will be the caretaker. You will stay invisible. You will carry our shame and never speak of it. But sometimes, a different kind of soul enters that lineage. A soul whose very presence starts to unravel the script. This is where individuation begins, the soul's journey toward becoming whole. It starts with tension, disconnection, maybe even feeling exiled from your own family. But at the core lies what Jung called the sacred wound, that original break that actually opens a gateway to who you really are. This pain isn't random. Jung believed your greatest suffering often conceals your soul's true purpose. And for many of us, that path begins with the wound of being born into a family that could never truly see us. This is the archetype of the chosen one. Not the golden child, not the favorite, but the one called to consciousness. The one who sees what others deny, who feels what others push down and refuse to acknowledge. Not to suffer forever, but to transmute generations of darkness into light. Here's the first reason your soul chose this path. You're here to break the pattern. Some families pass down jewelry or recipes. Yours pass down silence, shame, and the fine art of pretending everything's okay when it's not. No one talks about what's really happening, but everyone feels it. There are unspoken rules carved into every glance, every conversation that suddenly stops when you walk into the room. Don't cry, don't question, don't speak unless you're spoken to. And for the love of all that's holy, never, ever name what actually hurts. But then you showed up, and something deep inside you just couldn't follow that script. You felt the rage simmering beneath the surface. You sensed the grief that no one was allowed to express. You noticed how love always came with conditions, not based on who you were, but on how well you played the game. Jung believed that family trauma doesn't just vanish. It repeats, living in the shadows of generations until someone is born who actually sees it clearly. That someone is you. You probably spent years wondering what was wrong with you. Why have you never felt at home in the place you were supposed to belong? Why their rules felt foreign to your soul? Why couldn't you laugh when they laughed, or believe what they all claimed to believe? The truth? Your soul carried different instructions. You weren't here to fit in. You were here to wake up, to hold up the mirror no one wanted to look into and say, "This ends with me." Yes, they resisted you, called you dramatic, rebellious, selfish, too sensitive. But what they labeled as rebellion was actually remembrance. You remembered something they had forgotten. That love shouldn't hurt. That silence isn't safety. That pretending isn't peace. Breaking the pattern won't make you their favorite child. It might make you the family outcast, but it will make you whole. Here's the second reason your soul chose this journey. The sacred wound becomes your greatest gift. Not all gifts come wrapped in pretty paper with a bow on top. Some arrive as wounds, sharp, invisible, and strangely sacred. You might not remember the exact moment, but somewhere along the way, the world taught you that you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too soft, too wild, too real. Or maybe not enough, not worthy of attention, not safe to be truly seen. So you learned to split yourself in two. You learned to smile when you wanted to scream. You learned to make yourself smaller to fit into rooms that were never meant for your soul. You became whatever was needed, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, a shadow of who you really were. Jung called this the sacred wound, a rupture in your psyche that doesn't just hurt, it creates space. And in that hollow space, something begins to grow. Your true self starts its slow, powerful emergence. That child who watched everything quietly, who noticed every subtle shift in tone, who could sense when love was about to turn cold, who became fluent in reading the energy of every room. That child wasn't weak. They were becoming wise. Jung believed the wound is where the light enters. Not perfect, shiny light, but the light of real awareness, of depth, of soul. So many people born into toxic families carry this invisible inheritance, a sensitivity so sharp it can feel like a curse. But what if it's not? What if it's the very thing that will ultimately save you? Because when you finally face that pain, instead of running from it, it transforms into power. The sacred wound isn't asking you to build walls around your heart. It's asking you to soften into truth. The third reason goes even deeper. You were born to see what others wouldn't. In homes where silence was the key to survival, you noticed everything. The fake smiles, the unspoken rules, the way the energy shifted when certain people walked into a room, how love got withheld like a weapon, and how truth got bent around everyone's comfort. Even as a child, you couldn't unsee it. The hypocrisy, the control, the emotional games that everyone pretended weren't happening. They probably told you that you were being dramatic, too suspicious, and reading too much into things. But that was never the truth. Jung believed some souls are born as natural seers, intuitive observers of what's hidden in the unconscious. They don't come to blend into the background. They come to shine light on what's been kept in the dark. And in toxic families, that illumination feels dangerous, because truth threatens the whole fragile structure that denial has spent years building. So, when you named what nobody else would dare to speak, the tension, the favoritism, the manipulation, the narcissistic behaviors, suddenly you became the threat. Not because you were wrong, but because you were absolutely right. Your gift of seeing clearly was never a character flaw. It was your soul's refusal to live inside someone else's lie. This is why the black sheep so often feels exiled. Not because they're lost or confused, but because they're awake in a family that's chosen to stay asleep. And here's the final reason, perhaps the most profound of all. You're the evolution they've been waiting for. Jung once said, "The greatest influence on the child is the unlived life of the parent." That weight can feel unbearable sometimes, like invisible chains holding you to a story you never asked to inherit. But here's what most people miss. Sometimes the child grows beyond what the parent ever dared to imagine for themselves. You might have spent your whole life believing you were born into the wrong family by some cosmic mistake, a soul that got misplaced, dropped into the wrong storyline. But what if you're exactly who they were waiting for? Not to fix them. That's not your job. Not to carry their pain or become their emotional savior, but to show them what healing actually looks like by simply becoming who you truly are. Soul evolution isn't a selfish act. It ripples outward, reaching back through generations, quietly stirring something in the roots of your entire family tree. When one person wakes up and chooses consciousness over comfort, the whole lineage feels that shift. Not everyone will follow you. Not everyone is ready for that kind of change. But you're the one pushing up through the cracked concrete, the new growth rewriting what everyone thought was permanent and unchangeable. Your choice to face your sacred wound, to walk the path toward wholeness, to refuse to repeat their patterns, that's revolutionary work. It breaks the cycle, not by fighting against what came before, but by becoming a living example of what transformation looks like. You carry the unfinished stories of your ancestors, Stories of love that got lost, trauma that never got healed, truth that had to stay silent. Through your becoming, those stories get a chance to shift and heal. Now, let me share something important about your sacred work in this world. So take a deep breath right now. Feel your feet connected to the ground beneath you. Place your hand over your heart and speak these words with intention. I was not born into love to become lost. I was born into pain to become conscious. Now ask yourself, what patterns am I here to break? What has my wound taught me to see that others cannot? What truth do I still fear speaking out loud? Your healing is not selfish. It's sacred work. For yourself, for your ancestors, and for the generations that will come after you. This is how the chosen ones rise. Not with fanfare or applause, but quietly and courageously, from the inside out. If you were born into a toxic family, understand this. You were not cursed. You were chosen. Chosen to see what others couldn't see. Chosen to feel deeply even when it hurt like hell. Chosen to change the story instead of repeating it. Jung taught that the soul arranges its entire life to find the fracture that becomes the doorway home to itself. You are not broken. You are becoming. And even if your family never understands the path you're walking, your soul does. Welcome to the journey of the spiritually gifted ones, where every wound holds wisdom, and the black sheep become the healers of generations.